League Two. The name tells you everything you need to know. It's the fourth tier of English football. You get relegated and you'll be in the mix with some semi-professional teams and will be considered a non-league club. I'm not going to say that the stadiums are some of the best in the world, but they are full of character, which is just as good in my book. So, with that being said, here are the EFL League Two Stadiums for 2021-22. Holker Street, home of Barrow. Straight away you'll see that this league is not for the faint-hearted. You've got to be a real football fan to stand in the rain on the terraces. Only around 1,000 or so spectators get to be both seated and protected from the elements. It's not the prettiest of stadiums, but it's a heck of a lot better than what the land used to be used for. Prenton Park, home of Tranmere Rovers. It reminds me of a couple that we saw in the Scottish Premiership, with its particularly large stand at one end. It's known as the Cop. At the opposite end you have a cowshed, or a stand known as the cowshed that houses the away supporters. At first I thought that perhaps that was meant as an insult to the away supporters, but no. It just used to look like a cowshed. Not so much anymore. Vale Parade, home of Bradford City. The biggest stadium in the league. It's almost like a mini St James's Park with that roof. It's shaped that way for the same reason. As you can see, there's not a whole lot of wiggle room, and so these sides had to remain small. People from outside of Europe often comment asking why they build stadiums in these built-up areas, but they often start out as just your regular sports field and slowly grow as the club does. This was opened in the 1800s. It would have been just a modest football ground, home to an amateur club. Also, I quite like the lopsided design. Memorial Stadium, home of Bristol Rovers. Well, this is awkward. I mentioned this stadium in the Premiership rugby video. I'm not going to say it's terrible, but it has certainly seen better days. But it's kind of true, and I was comparing it to Ashton Gate, which is... it's just better, come on. For the longest time they were planning on building a new stadium elsewhere, but those plans didn't come to fruition. They're now more likely to redevelop this stadium than move to a new one. But for now, this will have to do. And like I said, it's not terrible, just a little outdated. There is a lot of terracing, but you know what they say, sitting is the new heroin. So that could be a plus. Vale Park, home of Port Vale. In many ways they are the Everton of Stoke-on-Trent. Not only because they have a larger club in the same city, but just like Everton's rival Liverpool, Port Vale's rival Stoke City uses the name of the city itself, which I can't help but feel gains them some supporters. But Port Vale sounds kinda poetic. Anyway, their ground has an interesting look to it. The two corners to the north are filled in, but the others aren't. This section in particular is fairly unique. Brunton Park, home of Carlisle United. This is a fascinating stadium. I love grounds with plenty of quirks, and this has no shortage. For starters, the east stand is not in line with the field, because they had plans on moving the field that didn't eventuate. Okay, that's not ideal, but it's the main stand that I like the most. It's a mix of terracing and seating, both old and new seating. I don't know, I just like that for some reason. The ground is prone to flooding, however, and the club has made plans in the past to move to a new stadium. Colchester Community Stadium, home of Colchester United. Unlike the last one, it doesn't seem to have a whole heap that sets it apart. A single tier, all-seated stand on each side. But, when you're in the fourth tier, I think you'd be pretty happy with a stadium like this. Quality over quirky is their motto. Which is ironic because the site that the stadium was built on was originally known as Cuckoo Farm. So you think that maybe they would have something cuckoo about it. It certainly looks good though. Broadfield Stadium, home of Crawley Town. It's named for the brook that it's located next to, which is ironic because a broad field is pretty much the exact opposite of a brook. But anyway, it's a nice little ground, this one. You've got the two all-seated stands along the sidelines, The main stand doesn't run the length of the field, so the terraces sort of bend around the corner to fill in the gap. St James Park, home of Exeter City. Not to be confused with the slightly larger stadium in Newcastle, or this completely irrelevant park in London. Although you really shouldn't get this ground confused with any other because it's quite distinctive. Be careful when performing a sliding tackle on a wet day. You might slide all the way off the field and onto the train tracks 10 metres or so below. That's why you have to listen when they say mind the gap. It's not a joke. But the gap also offers some views of outside the stadium, which I'm always a fan of. Wetherby Road, home of Harrogate Town. You can really see which clubs have spent most of their time in the lower divisions. If I'm not mistaken, a couple of years ago they beat Notts County in the playoffs, who are the biggest club in non-league, to themselves become the smallest club in the Football League. This is just a very quaint football ground that you might find anywhere in the country. I like it when the trees are significantly taller than the stands. It's very... what's the word I'm looking for? I don't know, it gives it a country feel. Victoria Park, home of Hartlepool United. Not to be confused with this slightly larger stadium in Melbourne, Australia, or this completely irrelevant park in London. Although on the surface it looks quite typical, it's not without its quirks, including this corner terrace, which I'm gonna go ahead and assume is no longer used. If it is, they're the worst seats in the house. Although, they're not seats, are they? But other than that, it's your standard League Two ground. Although given the diversity we've seen so far, I don't think such a thing exists. Brisbane Road, home of Leyton Orient. Not only is the name of the club intriguing, but the ground itself is as well. Some clubs fill in the corners of the stadium with seats or terraces, or maybe even administrative buildings. But they've gone with apartment buildings. And I've never really wanted to live in an apartment, but if I can watch football out of the kitchen window while cooking a curry, that might change my mind. Anyway, this isn't the wide world of real estate, it's the wide world of stadiums.
Well, actually, it's stadia.
What?
The plural of stadium is stadia, not stadiums.
Oh, for f***'s sake. You all saw the knife in his hand, right? Despite the strange layout, I quite like this ground. Barrow Sports Ground, home of Sutton United. Wow, this one is unique in a completely different way. The lack of buildings. And those with a keen eye may be able to notice that it has an artificial turf field. You also might have guessed that the ground used to host athletics. In fact, the track was only removed 6 or 7 years ago. It's hard to believe that it's in the same league as Bradford City. But I'll say this. It might not be the best stadium in the league, but the league is better for having it. Field Mill, home of Mansfield Town. It claims to be the oldest ground in the Football League, although Bramall Lane claims the same. The contrast between the eastern and western sides of the ground is very dramatic. A double-tiered all-seater to the west, and then... I don't even know what's going on over on the other side, but because of that, those sitting in the western stand get panoramic views of Mansfield, the town that sounds more like a stadium than this stadium does. The New Lawn, or the fully charged New Lawn I should say, home of Forest Green Rovers. It is bizarrely sponsored by a YouTube channel dedicated to electric vehicles. But the synergy is perfect given that the ground is the world's first vegan and carbon neutral stadium. Even the grass is organic, and the mower that cuts it is a solar powered robot. I've said it before on this channel, but it's got to be because of that name, Forest Green Rovers. But since they've gone green, attendance figures have increased exponentially. So they've proven that you don't need to kill animals or burn coal to play football. I must have been doing it wrong. Rodney Parade, home of Newport County, a Welsh club. And being Welsh, it's also shared with 2 rugby union teams. This ground has something I really like, and it's something that's quite common in this league. that being a mix of old and new. The very old-fashioned stand over on the west looks great, but it's not for everyone. So over on the east you have a completely modern stand. Very nice. Sixfields Stadium, home of Northampton Town. From Wales to another area that likes its rugby. Presumably, because this is the rugby stadium over here and it's slightly bigger. I can also make the assumption that they absolutely hate athletics in Northampton. It's quite a straightforward one, this stadium. You've got a single tier all-seater on each side, with the stands behind the goals not running the width of the pitch. Boundary Park, home of Oldham Athletic. You know what's a great brand of paint? Yes, that's right, British paints. Oh no. Once again we have some older stands and a very new stand, which looks great. But I hope the older stands have some sort of heating. Because according to some people, this is the coldest ground in the Football League. I can't confirm that, but either way it gets the nickname Ice Station Zebra because of it. That was a movie from the late 60s about... well, your guess is as good as mine. I think there was some ice involved. Zebra might have been a code word or something. And not far away is Spotland Stadium, home of Rochdale. It's one of the many football stadiums in England that started out its life as a humble cricket ground. The cricket team were forced out and now play over here. They had a 2-wicket win last week where they chased down a score of 7. Strange that they don't just use this ground. Anyway, it's a typical English football ground, mostly seated but with a small terrace to the west. And once again, due to its small size, it's overshadowed by the nearby trees. I like trees, okay? Also not far away is Moor Lane, home of Salford City. Firstly, props to them for the red roof. Too many white or silver roofs. Same goes for cars, too many white cars. It's boring, innit? I also like how the stands and the roof canopy wrap around the entire field, and the seats are evenly distributed despite the very low capacity. And due to the low height of the stands, there's plenty of tree action once again. Will you see a koala, or a possum, or whatever they have in England, a squirrel I guess? Who knows, it's all part of the fun. Blandford Park, home of Scunthorpe United. It's like a bigger, older and less red version of the last one. As with many grounds in this league, they have quite a few of these steel columns holding up the roof, which in most cases wouldn't be ideal. But I'll give them a pass considering the club's nickname is Iron, and steel is made from iron. Broadhall Way, home of Stevenage. Not to be confused with Stevenosity, the measurement of how many Stevens a particular area has per capita. Incidentally, Stevenage has a Stevenosity of 12 per 1,000, which is slightly above the UK average. A high Stevenosity has been linked to fertile soil, which is quite apparent when you look at the green grass and the surrounding trees. Okay, no more tree talk. But seriously, this ground is very bucolic, that's the word I was looking for. County Ground, home of Swindon Town. Okay, we've seen plenty of stadiums that look like this, so I'll just point out the obvious difference. The ground features an uncovered stand at one end, known as the Stratton Bank, which includes a Rolex clock to tell the time. You can't really see it, but trust me, it's nothing special. But I do quite like the look of having 1 or 2 stands open to the elements. I'm not sure the spectators sitting in the rain would agree, but at least they know the time. Bescott Stadium, home of Walsall. I don't think I've seen a stadium quite like this. Well, 3/4 of the stadium are much like a few that we've seen so far, with the fairly symmetrical wraparound roof canopy, but combined with that big double-tiered stand at one end, kinda makes the stadium look like, I don't know, like a bed or something. It looks a bit odd, but they obviously can't change it. You've made your bed, now lie in it. But to be fair, on the inside that larger stand actually looks pretty cool. And those were the League Two stadiums. If you enjoyed the video, please consider subscribing. Thanks for watching. Have a good one.